Hello, welcome to Podsongs, where we interview inspirational people in service to others as inspiration for a new song. Today, my guest is May Erlewine, and her guest is Cheryl Strayed. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, it's quite an unusual episode because normally, we pick a guest and you gain inspiration from them, but you've already done an album about this guest.
Yeah, I am so excited. I've been such a fan for a long time. And so, yeah, this is going to be really cool.
Wow, because your last album was called Tiny Beautiful Things. Was it just one song? You didn't write the whole album about her, maybe it was one song inspired by her book.
Yeah, there was one song that I wrote that's the title track, and
Okay,
it
right.
was very much inspired by the book. But the whole album is sort of about humanness and connection,
Hmm.
and also the many incarnations of how love shows up. So it's very aligned with the book
Hmm.
in that, like, when we share our burdens, even though we may not know a solution or an answer, it becomes more manageable somehow when we can share
Mm.
things with one another. So, in that way, the whole album is connected, and that's why I chose to name the whole record that. And I have reached out to her many different times and haven't directly connected. So this is, I think, the first time we will have ever directly connected, which is so cool.
Father Christmas, yeah. I guess
Yeah,
every day.
yeah, yeah.
No, I reached out to her many times as well, but it took a long time. I think she's like many people, the inbox is not the you get so, especially because she was or is how do you write that? How do you say that? A romantic troubleshooter, Dear John letter. What do you call them in the
Oh,
newspaper?
advice columnist or
Yes.
yes,
I'm
that's
not
what
sure
yeah,
the technical name. We can.
yeah.
So you must get many people saying, listen, sugar, I've got some problems here. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think also it seems like recently this book, because of the play and everything, has gotten a lot of attention, and now the show as well. So I'm sure she's probably inundated with things about this book.
Yeah, but she suggested you. I reached out to her and then she suggested you because she had heard the album and she really liked it and she wanted
Oh,
she wanted to speak to you. So
that's
uh,
so amazing. I'm
mhm.
really, really excited.
And how did you hear about her first? Was it through the film or the book or the column or the play?
It's funny. I heard about her through Tiny Beautiful Things first. And I was working on a record. Um, Actually wasn't even fully engrossed in the process yet. But my producer was like, "You would need to read this book. You will love it. It's so aligned with so many things that you speak about and write about in your song." And so he recommended it like ferociously to me. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to read Tiny Beautiful Things. So that was the first book that I had read of Cheryl's. And I had written a song called Wild and didn't even know about, like, kind of ignorantly didn't know about that book, or had not seen the movie either at that time. And so then everyone kept saying, like, "Oh, it's wild about the book," because I know you're a Cheryl Strayed fan. And I was like, wow, I just got to know of her and Tiny Beautiful Things, and didn't even realize that was. So then I watched the movie and then I read Wild, and I already had the song. So I already had a connection to her in that strange way. And everyone was like, "Oh, she has to hear the song Wild." And I think a bunch of people sent her that song, which was just a uniquely random connection. And then as I got to know that book, the Tiny Beautiful Things book, I bought like probably like 35 copies and given them away. Like,
Oh,
I've
okay.
written my name in the back of all of them just to, like, and then put them out and give them away to people, because it's such a beautiful book, especially if people are going through transformative times. It's just like a kind of like a comrade, like you feel less alone somehow when you're reading it.
Mm.
So I've given it to people that are just in those times, those rich times of life. So I'm a huge fan in that way, and have come to know just a small, like, that book has been like, such a huge part of my life. And I've read Wild. Those are the only two books of hers that I read so far. And it's because I just keep going back to Tiny Beautiful Things over and over again and reading excerpts. So yeah, anyways. And when I released the record, I read from her book and did like in between songs, did little quotes of hers and like kind of had a whole thread going through the whole show. Um, so yes, anyway, I'm very, very much a fan and excited.
No, that's a wonderful story because I was also reading about, your bio. I mean, we only put in there the nice bits. I mean, but I see you were, so there may be some parallels as well. Maybe you were hitchhiking when you were young. Do you see any parallels in your life as well? You're very, wandering heart as well, and did
Yeah,
resonate.
from the little I know about her life, she's definitely lived a lot.
Mm,
And I can hear that in some of her truths that she shares. And I'm excited to ask her some questions about that today. Just what she attributes um, some of her like honesty to. Like
mm,
she writes with the courage that not everyone does.
yep.
And I strive for that
Hmm.
as a songwriter. And so maybe that's what drew me to her work is some
Hmm.
similarities of like writing honestly.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think I don't know a ton about her life, just a little bit. And from what I believe, like
Yeah,
she's had her share of
sure. Well,
things to get through.
yeah,
And she's been so generous with offering that for others that are going through struggles. So I think that's beautiful work to do in the world.
it is. It takes real guts to put yourself out like that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
absolutely.
I'm so glad you're interviewing her because we reached out and, I do half the interviews myself and half have guest musicians, but because, it's going to be a much better interview that you do it because, you have this so much more connection. And if I just ask questions, it would just be another interview. But you know, this is like next level when somebody like, a fan interviews their hero or somebody they look up to, then it's just so much more electricity in the room. It's such a connection. I'm really excited to be here listening to you two chat.
Oh, thank you, Jack. Yeah, I'm really, really excited. And she is a true hero as
Mhm.
a writer. So you don't get these opportunities all the time. So
Mhm.
thank you for giving this space to both of us,
Yeah, well, I mean, you're a hero to many people as well. I mean, I've know reading all about your comments and all the reviews of your albums, and you get up on stage and you do your art, and you get instantaneous applause. I think many writers must be quite jealous of the reaction you get, and the confirmation. Whereas in a writer, I imagine you're sitting at home, and could do a couple of book signings, but you don't get that feedback. So it's going to be great for her as well, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm so curious. We both have a similar practice, I imagine, but a very different way that it reaches people.
Mm.
And so as a writer, it's such a quiet way that it reaches people and touches people. And you must hear about it so much later. Like you sort of
Yeah,
put the book out
yes.
in the world and then all of a sudden it's probably like, I wonder what that feeling is like. Because it's a long time, I bet, before you start to even know how it's impacting people. And
Well,
I'm sure at this point she's showered with gratitude from so many folks that I know love this book, and all of her work actually. So yeah, but it's very different the way we interact with people in the world. And yeah, yeah.
yeah, maybe that's something you could ask her about because maybe that's changed with the advent of technology. And yeah, she has two hit podcasts, and often I'm doing these podcasts. I'm chatting to you today, but it feels like we're speaking to the void a bit because I forget people are going to be listening to us this conversation afterwards. Because
Yeah.
I'll release it maybe in a year or something. It's like whenever we can get the song done. I mean, it could take a while. I know your songs are so polished, and it's not an overnight thing, is it? So yeah,
Yeah. I never have an expectation. Sometimes they're really fast, and sometimes they take a while, but the process is really beautiful. So I'm
of
looking
course.
forward.
Yeah, and especially in this case because she's going to hear this one, and yeah, it's exciting. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
And
I want to ask you, just in the idea of the fact that this recording, if the audio of mine sounds okay for you.
yeah, it's okay. I have a good plug-in
Okay.
that makes it sound like you're in a studio.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
And so
Awesome.
for the collaboration, are you okay to do that? You work with some of my musicians and we we co-write. Is that okay for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that would be exciting, and we'll kind of see what it needs as we go. Of course, there's
Mm.
so many unknowns, but yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, but I don't want to take this private experience away from you. Then, the songwriting, you're going to be super inspired after this. So, it's going to be your song. We'll go with whatever you want. I don't want to, stamp rain on your parade or anything.
Oh, thank
But
you.
just to, because you're such a beautiful sound. Michigan Songbird is really an apt title for your work, and your voice fits so well with this rich production. And yeah, I know the guys would love to work with you on that.
That sounds really fun. It's really I have found the people that I often work with here, and so the opportunity to play with new folks is not always. I mean, it's always there, but I don't always do that because I've got these groups with these people and we know each other. So that idea is really exciting for me because it'll be a whole new experience. And I find that for the creative spirit, that's always really good because
Hmm.
I'm going to learn things from all of you that I wouldn't know otherwise. And I think that's what helps me to do to kind of
Yeah,
branch out and work with new people. And so, yeah, thank you for that opportunity.
no, that's great. I love the stuff you did with Teo Katzman. He had a real
Yeah.
energy. He brought that in, and you could tell that you changed you a little bit as well. And
Yeah. We're actually working on a record right now together.
oh, another one.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. This,
wow.
he's producing this one. And that's been like, you're right. He brings his own energy to it. And it's really cool as even in my own career, sure, but to watch other artists as well. When you bring in another influencer to see how it changes things, like
Yeah, yeah.
collaboration is truly is its own animal. And with Theo, it's definitely a different record than I would make if it were just me. So we've been having a lot of fun. We're just starting the seed process, so
Oh
it's,
gosh, you're quite well
it's
on with it.
exciting, and many long hours of just like kind of listening to things. But
Is he the producer that made you read the book?
nope, actually, the producer is Tyler Duncan. He
Oh,
produced
okay.
a record of mine called Leather Lion, and he's produced stuff for Theo. He's done a lot of Theo's records, and he's been part of the Wolfpack stuff too. Um, I think he's worked for Darren Chris, just a bunch of different folks. But yeah, he's a wonderful producer, and he and Theo are really dear friends. So Theo is actually a huge fan of this book also.
Ah,
They're like they're the two people in my life that are as geeked about it as I am. So we all talk about it all the time. But Theo had also already read it before I had. And so I think Cheryl is actually a fan of Theo's music, and they've interacted on Twitter a couple times.
oh my god, you've got a love triangle going on here.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's all funny. But yeah, we are all big fans of hers. And I think it is because of that, authentic voice she uses. It's really refreshing and inspiring as a creative to see someone do that.
To say it
Uh,
again, what did you?
It's just so inspiring when someone is using that authentic voice
Authentic voice. Okay, right.
as a creative. It's like,
Mm.
oh, it's a gift to us because it gives us all more courage.
But what do you mean authentic? Like, in what sense?
I just feel like she's being brave and saying how she actually feels, even when it might not be polished or it might not be like a popular opinion or like she's just bold, I think, in her writing.
Okay.
And whenever anybody's bold and vulnerable, it's like refreshing and inviting. Like it's like,
Mm.
okay, she's doing that. Like it does more permission for others. Like you make more room in that vulnerable space. And so I think that's what she's done for me and Theo and Tyler for sure. Like just made a little more room in that vulnerable, authentic space with her writing.
Mm. Yeah, I know with like some pop music lyrics, particularly pop lyrics, when you do that, they kind of cut through. Just Alanis Morissette came into my mind then, just as an
Yeah.
example. Uh, those you kind of go, what? What did she say? Yeah.
Yeah. I was just listening to Jagged Little Pill for the first time in a really long time the other day. And that album was such a huge deal. And it is because of what you're saying. Like she was being so raw.
Yeah.
And I mean the production is great, music is great. But what I remember about it is her raw voice, just like
Yeah.
cutting through the pop airways. It was just like, whoa, this lady is mad.
Mm.
Like,
Mm.
and she's not afraid to tell us about it. And I think so many people are just struck by her in that way. So yeah.
And so many other albums, he wasn't as angry maybe. He didn't do as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Gosh. Are you drinking your own coffee there?
I make tea right now, but
Ah.
I'm a coffee drinker. I go back and forth.
Did you
Tea has
because
a
you have your
little
own
less,
you know,
tea is a
you're
little
already
less
up enough,
caffeine.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a coffee blend that I made with a coffee company here.
I
And
saw that, yeah.
I'm an avid coffee drinker.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
having your own brand is, that's a great idea,
Yeah. It
Yeah.
was really fun. I worked with them because I took a few different beans that they had. And we tried like everything. We tried all these different blends and different ratios and different flavor profiles until I found one that I really loved.
Mm.
So it was a really fun process to do that with them. They kind of let me be a coffee geek and walked me through the process. So it was cool.
That's great. So we're gonna see any other May Erlewine products in the future?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, that's a great idea because, in these days of streaming and, well, particularly in COVID, we all had to look for new revenue streams when the touring was cut off, and so maybe you see more of this happening in the future.
Yeah. It's always fun to have different things you can share with people. You know, merch is always like, it's a big undertaking to come up with something cool that you feel really connected to still.
Mm.
And the coffee thing was fun because I just like adore the whole process. So that was a natural one. But
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see.
It's funny how you have these crossovers. Maybe they reach out to you for a song as well, a theme song, and be these strange crossovers.
Yeah. I love collaborations like that with different crafts coming
Mm.
together. And I mean this is that as well. Like,
Yeah.
Cheryl and I are both writers, but we're working in different worlds with it. And so this is really fun. My friends that I did the coffee collaboration with, they're just so extremely ethical and progressive in the way that they work with the farmers.
Mm.
Um, and they kind of go above and beyond fair trade into kind of coming to know the communities and what the needs are in the communities and kind of work in solidarity in that way to create environments that are really sustainable for the farmers based on what they say their needs are. So I've done a lot of traveling with that company. I went to Chiapas, Mexico, and to Ethiopia
Oh,
with them
wow.
to get to know these coffee growing communities. That was really, really wonderful. But it's cool to not just be making coffee, but also be very, very aligned with their kind of mission as coffee roasters. It's like they're really, as far as I know, and what I've learned from the companies that I love, they are the most like ethical and involved in that way. So it's really progressive. So that felt cool because it wasn't just the coffee; it was also being aligned with them as progressives and sort of a global community outlook. Getting to know these coffee farmers and the whole process of making coffee is a very big labor of love. It's not an easy thing to do.
No, no.
So yeah,
But
it helped
Ethiopia,
me
I mean,
value it.
yeah, I thought you hopped down to Colombia. I thought that would be easy, but Ethiopia, that's quite a stretch from America.
Yeah, totally. I was there for almost a month.
Really?
And it was part of this whole event called the Run Across Ethiopia. And it was all of these runners running marathons every day through the coffee growing regions. And then the whole thing was a fundraiser for schools in these coffee growing communities because that's what they said their great need was more school facilities. And so all these people came and were doing this crazy run.
You
And
were
I was
running it?
I ran a little bit, but I was there as a musician. In my
Yeah,
job,
you got the good deal.
we made a whole record about the whole experience, um, to sort of fundraise and also be a cultural component. So
Mm.
we met with all these musicians in Ethiopia and got to perform and work with them. We got to know like what the Ethio jazz scene was like and sort of brought some of culture here into our music scene, and just let people know a little bit about what music is in Ethiopia and songs about that experience. So that was a really cool project. And yeah, a long journey way over on the other side of the world. But yeah, it was a really beautiful place.
Yeah.
Ethiopia is so magical.
That's really an old place now. It's kicked off with a bit of a civil war, apparently. Maybe since you went. How long ago did you go?
We went in 2011.
Okay. Yeah, that's a while ago.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, wonderful. No, that's the kind of dream projects to do. Because you also do a lot of activism as well with your music.
Yeah, I try to use it. I admire those songwriters that use their voice in a way to speak for people and about things happening in the world. It's a tricky line. Not
See,
everybody appreciates it, but I
well,
try
listen,
for
the episodes of this show that I've enjoyed the most are those in service to others, genuinely, because, as musicians, we can sing about something, but we're not out there, you know, in a bulletproof vest, dropping food parcels or something. And there's a lot of people who have really got their necks on the line, and rewarding them with a song is, yeah, feels really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's very fulfilling to have, whether it's an activist role or something else, just having a deeper purpose behind
Mhm.
art always gives it that depth um, that you can't kind of fabricate, you know?
Mhm. And also, I think it makes for better songs because many times if you can only write about love so many times, and you're
Yeah.
looking for new subject material, and yeah, some of the guests we've had on have you would never have, well, you'd never have you never hear about it, like wars in obscure countries that the government's keeping under wraps, or people who've done incredible brave things. It's a discovery. So yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, but today we're doing love, but obviously nothing wrong with that. But
Yes.
didn't need to knock Cheryl, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's
No.
a deep thing.
Yeah, and I mean, this kind of emotional work is so powerful too because a lot of activists are grieving, and I think what Cheryl does is working with grief a lot, and
Yeah.
so she's providing a lot of room for emotions.
Mm.
And I think in order to do any work in the world, you have to start with managing your own self. So I do think there is a lot of amazing work she's done in creating that kind of healing space for people, feeling like less alone. She's
Yeah.
created like less isolation is a very progressive thing to do in this day and age, I think.
A little less alone. I'm just writing around some lyric ideas
Yeah.
for. I could really narrow this podcast down, and I could call it something like musicians talk to therapists, or because when I reach out to musicians, they all want to talk to psychologists, or help. Many musicians, I don't know what it is. They seem to have seems to, or maybe like you going back to Alanis Morissette, maybe the successful people are the ones who have some issues. Let's just say have some
Yeah.
struggles.
I read this whole article once about like it was a psychologist who wrote about how difficult the life of a musician is, like on your mental health. And she did this whole, it was a really beautiful article just talking about how unstable it is, the lifestyle, and
Right.
just like all the kind of demands and even like psychologically attaching your work to yourself. So it's just all kind of connected. So there creates a lot of ego and a lot of like security and all of these like external affirmations instead of internal ones. Like
Right. Okay.
it just sets you up, and it's a dangerous world. So you got to be pretty steady, I think, to get through without being sort of, you know, taken by the storm of it all. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I think that's true for a lot of art in
A
general,
lot of
not
artists, yeah,
just,
and
not
actors,
music.
and yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that you shouldn't get into it if you've had a pretty stable childhood. You shouldn't really get into it because you're going to get nothing from it. At least if you're going through it messed up, there's a chance you could use it as therapy. But
Yeah.
if you're already pretty balanced, if you're at the top, you're going in, you're only going to go one way. So
Yeah. Isn't that sad? I wish that it
yeah,
were. I don't think it's always true, but it's mostly pretty true, I think. And
yeah, it's funny because it's
that's,
true. It wouldn't be
yeah.
funny if it wasn't true.
And anytime I meet someone that just seems like really healthy and taking really good care of themselves and making music, I'm like, who are you? Like, what
Yeah.
happened? How did
And
you end up here? And they're usually people who like, they're like, oh yeah, this is just a little part of my life.
and there are people you'll never hear of because they're not going to make it.
Yes. So I'm like, oh yeah, music is a joy for me. And that's it. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, oh,
Good luck with that. Do it on
yeah.
them.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know.
Mm.
We strive to make it through. And I do think more people are figuring it out slowly, but it's going to heal a lot. It really can. And the more success you have doesn't necessarily mean easier. I think it's hard no matter what level you're at. You
Mm.
know, I have some friends who have family, they're a couple, they don't plan together their whole careers, and they're about 10 years older than I am. And they said, I get to make music for a living, but I'm not so famous that I don't have a life.
All
And
right.
they're like, I think that's making it. And I was like, oh yeah, like
Mm.
maybe making it where you're so famous and moving around so much you don't get to actually live or have family or a sense of home or whatever your priorities are. If you can't actually live, then it's a little dangerous. So, maybe making it is some sort of dance in between.
Mm.
Um, but I don't know. I do feel lucky to get to make a living doing what I love. That's pretty
Sure.
fun.
Are you one of the balanced ones, or should we find out later in the show?
I don't know.
We'll find out. I'll ask you.
I
No, wait.
think
Let's
I
not
think for
making
me,
judgment calls here.
for me, it's like it's a dance, right? Like,
On the
and
razor's edge.
yeah, it's like I'm in between feeling like I should be doing more, not doing enough, and like I do have a life right now. I have a daughter. I'm so lucky. She grounds me so much. So
Sure.
I do have to be balanced for my daughter, and I am. So she might be the reason why I have an easier time because, like,
Okay.
I got to be home, got to go to school, got to make school lunches. Like,
Mhm.
can't just be swept away by the lifestyle of musician because being a mom is my top priority. So
Okay.
I'm lucky. I'm lucky for that.
Yeah, but luckily you can also turn it on and off. You make an album, but maybe that's also people want to hear. They want to hear from artists and that they that they see a reflection of themselves in. And if most 99% of people are a little bit not very balanced, then you want to see some art that you can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm also fortunate. I think one thing that I always try to say to younger folks that are just entering into the scene is like, be careful who you surround yourself with because it will really determine the kind of career you have. And I've been lucky in that my bandmates and the people that I'm working with are really care about having balance and care about their families and their lives and are
Mm.
really just like very whole people. So,
Mm.
that helps.
And then you make sure everyone's read Tiny Beautiful Things.
Yes. Well, most of them have. I've given it away to most of my bandmates. So yeah, most of them.
Yay!
Right on cue. Oh, what a surprise.
Right. It is so nice to meet you. And hello, Jack.
Hello.
Hi, Cheryl. It's so nice to
Well,
meet you.
The only reason that Jack that I was like, May, it's so nice to meet you is, well, she's written a song called Tiny Beautiful Thing. So, that.
I'm not offended. Please don't worry.
Okay. I'm thrilled to meet you both.
Yeah, so excited to be here with you and nice to see your face. We were just talking a lot about you and all the wonderful work you've done. So thank you for making time.
We
Oh
built
my
you up here.
goodness.
So yeah, you better live up to it.
Oh my God. Thank
Rock
you.
here.
So you got on like a half hour before me to talk about what?
It's
So
you.
you have to
No,
wait
just
till the episode comes out.
About how great I am, right? Oh my God.
Yeah.
How funny.
Yeah. No, Jack was asking me about the album and just how this all kind of came to be from my perspective and just like my role in the music world and how I've been influenced by your work. So that's what we were talking about.
Wow. That is so amazing. Well, I can't wait to hear it because I don't know the full story. I just know that I think like one of your people on your team emailed me and I just clicked and listened to your beautiful music and I was like so honored and excited. So then when the person who coordinates this podcast emailed me to ask me to be on it, I think her name is Dora. Is it Dory? Is that right, Jack?
Sorry, yeah.
I said, yes, but I also have a suggestion for the musician that I'd love for you to invite,
no.
tell them about you. Because I knew I wanted to, I wanted to have the opportunity to get together with you at some point and talk to you and meet you.
I'm so grateful and honored that you did that. And yeah, I was like hoping somehow in the universe would allow us to have some conversation at some point. And also was like, maybe this isn't going to happen, but um, the art is there, and that was what was important. But it's like icing on a cake, or just like a dream to get to actually talk to you. And your writing has been a huge part of my heart and my life, and my writing too. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've looked a few times on your website to see if you were coming to Portland when I was here and could come see you, but it hasn't happened yet. But I'll take it. I'll take it on this Zoom podcast recording.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my dog Zazu is refusing to not be part of the podcast, so she's going to sit on my
Aw.
probably. This is Zazu. Oh,
Hi, Nazu. What kind of dog is it?
she's half French bulldog, a quarter Boston Terrier, and quarter King Charles Cavalier Spaniel. And
Whoa.
she's a big dog in a little dog's body. And she's
Amazing.
my absolute companion. Always wants to be near.
That is sweet. I have a puppy too. His name's Wilbur. I don't think
Oh,
I think he'll show his face, but he's here in spirit.
oh, nice. I have 2 dogs and 3 cats, so any number of them could wander by. But Zazu's definitely the most insistent.
Hmm. So cute. Well, I'm so glad that you could take the time. Jack, do you have a system of how you want this to go? Or
No, it's not like people said you have questions and everything, but if we were around for dinner in Cheryl's house, we wouldn't come around with questions written down. So,
Oh, so do you want us to just talk? Yeah, I
yeah.
feel like we've already been talking and taking over, but like, should we are we the 3 of us to have a conversation about?
No, just the two of you. As I don't have any questions. I just wanted to listen in. Really, I don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Great.
but here's the thing: is May probably has told you already some of the things that I'm curious about asking her. Is that okay?
Of
Like the
course. Well,
it's or
no, it's just we need inspiration for a song. So we need a hit, and we need not just any song. We need a hit song. So we need a super inspiring, tear-jerking conversation about the depths of the human soul. So
right.
however we
Yeah.
go about that is, I'm sure it will flow.
Well,
So
yeah,
yeah,
I have
maybe
so many. I have so many questions, but I also am like would love to share with you, Cheryl, anything you want to know about how I came to be here at all. And yeah, so we can just go naturally, however feels good.
I have so many questions too. I mean, I guess the first is, I'm curious about like where your music comes from within you and how you found your way to my work and how we intersected for you creatively. Like, why did you decide to, uh, you know, I mean, what did you draw upon with my tiny beautiful things to make your tiny beautiful things? I'm just curious about where you come from as a musician and how we intersected.
Yeah, I have been waiting to tell this story to you for so long. I have always sort of written songs that were pretty vulnerable as far as like being honest about what's happening with the heart and grief and things like that. And so I was working with a producer on a record called Motherland, which was actually written in the sort of transitional time of a divorce for me. So it was very raw and open and not in that like angry ex kind of way, but in just like this time of life where I'm changing. And that producer friend of mine was like, you need to read the book Tiny Beautiful Things. And he said it with such ferocity. Like he didn't just say that casually. It was like this 45-minute conversation where he went on about how this book had impacted his life. And
Wow.
so I took note, which my lifestyle doesn't allow enough time for reading as I would like. So it took a lot to keep it in my brain. And then I went and got it. And then in that state of kind of transition and despair, I just started reading our book and it became like a lifeline for me. Like And I felt like way less alone. And I'm sure many, many people say this to you, but that book allowed me to just feel less isolated in my struggle, because
Mhm.
here are all these correspondence moments with these people dealing with these incredibly hard things. And your response was always like, I don't even feel like it's an advice column, but like it wasn't always advice. It was just like, we are together in our humanness here. And that was what I needed to remember during that time. So I clung to this book, and I was telling Jack, I just started buying it. I bought so many copies of the book and would just give it to everybody that was going to, like, someone would be like, I'm having this really hard time going through this. And I'd be like, here, read this book. And everybody I've ever given it to has felt the same way. And it's been such a huge help. And so I know I'm just one small drop in the big ocean of this, but so that was a huge impact to me. It also happened that I wrote a song called Wild without ever reading or knowing about Your Wild that was on that record. So then everyone
Wow.
was like, oh, did you write the song Wild about Cheryl's Wild? And I don't even know about that Wild. Because then I know the book Wild, the movie, of course, and all the things. So there's just all these kind of intersecting things. And when it came to making this album with the pandemic, I wrote Tiny Beautiful Things in a moment of like hardship. And I was trying to remind myself of how we're good, how I'm not alone. And that book had done that for me earlier in life. I kind of came back to that sentiment and wrote the song. And then the whole album felt connected in the way of like, these are many incarnations of how love shows up. It's not always beautiful or perfect, but these are the things that move us. And so I wanted to call the album that, but I was a little scared to, because I respect you so much. And then I tried to write you to ask you, but I know you're so busy. And so I just went for it. I was like, hopefully she's okay with this. And it was all just a tribute and in honor of that work. And on top of that, I guess in honor of our shared humanness, like as a reminder of that.
And I love too that idea of the shared mission of, one of the reasons that I'm a writer is because I have found so much solace and comfort and illumination in literature, in all of art, really, in music and the most beautiful paintings, or uh, books are my religion. And so part of the work I do, and especially, like, I think I do this in all my books, but very directly in Tiny Beautiful Things as Dear Sugar, is I am trying to say exactly to send exactly the message that you received, May, is that we are not alone and that we are connected in our humanness. And I think you're right. Like, the advice is secondary. Most of the time, honestly, as Sugar, I'm not interested in telling people what to do or what I think they should do. I'm interested in helping them ask deeper questions maybe than they were able to pose to me. I feel like very often my answers point back to the person who wrote to me, and I say, I'm telling you this not because I think so, but because you think so, and let me show you your words, and that you might be afraid to hear. You might the truth, but you might be afraid to know it. So I, as Sugar, am going to be your companion as you dig deeper into your life. And so the fact that then you did that both as a friend, that you did that same thing that I'm doing, essentially, as a friend when you buy the book for people who are struggling or suffering. And then as an artist, as a musician, creating music that then is comforting and illuminating and, to others, and reminding them that we are connected. That is powerful. That is powerful medicine, I think, that we together, and not just we alone, but we together as part of that, like, beautiful wider community of artists of all kinds across not just the world, but really across all time, um, are doing and have done. It's, I think, the most moving thing to me. Of course, when I saw, um, that your album was called Tiny Beautiful Things, I was only honored. I only felt this was part of a really long tradition of artists of all sorts, inspiring and influencing each other and working together to create something bigger.
Mm. That's so beautiful. And yes, thank you. Thank you for saying all of that. I I have so many questions for you, but one of the things that like is interesting to me as a creative, and I was telling Jack that like the producer that gave me the book is like really respected for creating vulnerable space for artists. And then his friend who I'm working with as a producer now, is a writer who's writing from that place as well. And so like here's this lineage, like you're saying, we're carrying forward a lineage of vulnerability. And like Joni Mitchell is not someone who does that. She's very raw and open. And there's like a long legacy of both writers and musicians and artists that are all reaching. And I'm curious, like your voice as a writer is like so bold at times and like courageous in that way. I think, I don't know if you feel that way yourself, but it's like you have cultivated a self trust, it feels like, where you have some fearlessness in not only your ability to write about your own life, but your ability to also like write to somebody else and to share with them so deeply. And I'm wondering if you have any sort of clues to where that fearlessness comes from, or what fuels it, or how you've cultivated that creative fearlessness.
Yeah, I love that use that word cultivated twice, because I think that that's such a key thing. I think very often when we think another artist is brave or courageous in some way, we're like, well, they're so bold or brave and they can do this. And what gets left out is actually almost always courage of any sort is cultivated. There isn't like one category of people who are brave enough to be vulnerable and another category of people who aren't. It's all of us, I think, um, having to really practice that, over the course of many years. And just as I apprenticed myself to the craft of writing, I still consider myself an apprentice. I'm 54. I have been writing seriously since I was 19 or 20. And I have always seen myself as somebody who was learning the craft of how to make a sentence and a scene and, a story and all of that, but also learning the craft of how to be a brave and vulnerable person on the page and in real life, but definitely on the page. The things that we come to art for, none of them have anything to do with um, opacity. They all have to do with transparency. Okay. They all have to do with like,
Mhm.
we seek the truth. I mean, this is why art resonates across the world and across generations, because we dare to tell the truth about who we are. And so as soon as I could see that as like, I mean, it's interesting that we're having this conversation because uh, one of the projects I've just decided to do, I've been thinking about this for a long time, but I finally just last week started doing this. And that is, I'm just transcribing all of my journals. I kept a journal very diligently from the age of 19 until kind of my mid to late 30s when I had kids, and basically no more sitting around journaling.
Yeah.
And also I mean, I sort of blame them, but it's also then once social media came in and the internet and devices, like somehow I just went more on there instead of into my journal. But in any case, I have, almost 20 years of journals. And so I just began. And in this journal, I'm 20 and I'm saying, I have signed up to take an introduction to poetry writing class at the University of Minnesota with the poet Michael Dennis Brown. And I'm saying, I'm so excited. I'm so excited because I'm curious if if this creative writer thing I'm into is really for me. Is this who I really am? Do I want to do this? And on the first day of class, I come home from class and I write in my journal, my professor says that to be a writer, you have to take risks. And I'm not sure I'm going to be able to. Can I do that? And it's just so
Mhm.
beautiful that from the beginning for me, that learning how to write, in this way, this creative way I do, it was tied to learning how to be vulnerable in a public space, the page being a public space and the song being a public space. And, I think part of it is my natural inclination. I have always, since birth, been most curious about what's inside of us. I was always the person asking the question that you kind of weren't supposed to ask. I was always wanting to know how people were feeling. And also, I had a great intuitive sense. I'm highly sensitive. And if somebody's in the room and they're secretly sad, I'm going to know that they're sad. Like I've always been that way. And so I think I was naturally inclined to that kind of terrain in my work. And then it was all about cultivation. I mean, May, I want to know too what your answer to this question is. But the number of times that I have been absolutely terrified by something I wrote that I thought I can't write that, or if I wrote that, I certainly can't publish it, or what are people going to think of me when I say this, publish this sentence or this story. It's absolutely terrifying. And every time that I'd had to answer that question, should I do it or shouldn't I? I've done it. And every time I've done it, what's happened is not the thing I feared. I wasn't condemned. I wasn't judged, or rather, I was condemned and judged by a small group of people and a much larger, you can't please everyone, but a much larger group of people said, thank you, me too. Me too. I didn't know anyone felt that way. And so that also helped me because, of course, when you're loved, it makes you brave. Like, so people said, yes, we want to hear the truth. I do know that it's scary to step into those vulnerable places. But what I always say when I teach writing is, I promise you with all of my heart that if you do that, you won't be there alone once you step through that portal.
Mm.
What about you?
Wow.
Have you ever in your songs just thought, oh, it's too vulnerable. It's too close to the heart. It's too true.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I can resonate with your sort of anecdote there of like, every time I've done it, it's been exactly what everyone needed. And like, maybe not everyone, but the people that I'm trying to reach, it was their medicine and it was the thing that was most helpful. And like, I think about you and I like read this book, like the quote, like you have to tackle the motherfucking shit out of life. And I'm like, to write that line, like, it's like, makes me laugh, right? It like it wrestles out of me, like all the formalities, right? That line is just like, boom, like moves right through to something more real. And like, I think we really need that. We need to be woken up, even if it's uncomfortable, but it is scary to be the one doing that. And so I struggle with that line all the time. And I'm always kind of pushing myself and always asking those questions and trying to not do the safe thing. And the times where I've done the safe thing, I've always regretted it. Times when I've done the brave thing, I've never have, ever. So I think I resonate with everything you shared. I wonder a lot of times, like a lot of what you described about your personality and like maybe some of what's led you to being brave in those spaces is curiosity. And I wonder if you resonate with the idea that if curiosity is prioritized over fear, then we are allowed to kind of get into some of those more vulnerable, interesting spaces as humans.
Oh, for sure. And I would say I would add to fear judgment.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that if we can get curious instead of judgmental, how much opens up instead of judgmental or afraid, that if you can say, well, to turn into a question, like maybe a statement, like and sometimes a received statement for example, the first thing that comes to mind about fear is what you just said is, every time you've been safe, you regretted it. Every time you were brave, you were glad you were. And so what's interesting to me is, I think that in some deep way, what guides you in the right direction is when you stay open to asking that question, what is it that I want to guide me? Do I want my fear to rule my life, or do I want my courage to rule my life or guide my life? When I wrote Wild, I wrote this paragraph about fear is a story we tell ourselves. And that summer of 1995, when I decided to take that long hike on the Pacific Crest Trail, I quite simply chose to tell myself a different story. And the story I told myself is that I was safe and I was brave, which is interesting because, you just presented those as oppositions, but I would say like to be brave is the safe place. To be
Wow.
safe is the dangerous place because you put, the question is, what are you putting yourself at risk? To what are you putting yourself at risk? You know, to me, the riskiest thing is a life lived without ever trusting yourself and being brave, without making that leap. And likewise judgment. If you're always saying this is good or bad or you're wrong and I'm right or I'm a terrible person and you're a good person, those are dichotomies that are about judgment rather than curiosity. This is something that I've just learned again and again. When I can sit back and listen and observe, I could always be a more expansive, open-hearted, generous person. And of course, I do this a lot in Tiny Beautiful Things. One of the common comments I'll get in response to the letter writers, people will say, "Oh man, if I had answered that letter, I would have told them off, and you were so loving to them." And it's like, what I don't. I'm not interested in telling people they're wrong. Their perceptions about their lives or about the world are wrong. I'm interested in like I said before, maybe guiding people to ask deeper questions about their lives, and that is rooted in curiosity. That is a kind of courage too, to stay open.
Yeah, I I love that. And thank you for pointing out the differences between like safety, like the vulnerability or the bravery being what is safe. I think there's some quote somewhere, I forget who, and I apologize for that, but it's like, there's nothing more dangerous than an unexamined life. Like,
Yes, I
as,
know that quote. Who did that? Who said that?
or something,
I
something like that. I'm paraphrasing badly, but it's like, and it's especially like, I don't know. It's like if we're not thinking, and being curious about ourselves or reaching for a different depth, then yeah, that's pretty scary place
yeah,
because if we're not awake and feeling, we're operating at in a numb state, and we can do a lot of harm if we're unaware and numb to what's happening around us. Like, and so I think what you're saying is sort of an evolution of that, and especially in your creative world, like, um, I'm sort of curious, like, and this might be too personal, but if you have to remind yourself to do that every time you sit down, or is it a pretty natural state at this point, as far as like writing from that fearless place?
yeah, it's a pretty natural state at this point, but this is something that I think gets misunderstood. And I would love for you to answer the same question you just asked me because I'm curious about how this works in your songwriting and your music. Is that um, because I am so vulnerable and open and transparent, as transparent as I can bear to be in my work, I think that people think that that means that I'm open and vulnerable and that I write about everything, and that's not true. There is such a thing still as privacy. There are parts of my life that I haven't yet written about because, for any number of reasons, most of them having to do, frankly, with other people's privacy or
Yeah.
not wanting to hurt people. And so I do try to be, when I write, I try to be most often kind of like bold about myself rather than exposing others. But
Mhm.
yeah, so it's become this thing that I do pretty naturally. But there's no question that I have to every time I do it, every time I make that leap and go, okay, here we go, it's scary and I wouldn't say it's new, but it's always, I have to remind myself of all the things we've just said to each other. And this has even come into play in my transcriptions of my journals because, there are sometimes things I've had to transcribe that I'm like, no, this is stupid or embarrassing or what was I thinking? Why would I write such a dumb sentence? Well, I was 19, but but still,
Yeah.
Um, and I do think that it's a wonderful thing to stay humble, that like I said, I'm always apprenticing myself. So yeah, I do have to still stay brave, but that doesn't mean, it's not like I sit down and just open a vein. There's a lot of, you know, intellectual work involved, like, I don't tell a brave story just for the sake of being brave. I tell a brave story, in service to the art. What
Yeah.
about you? How do you navigate like what you write about or what you don't? Does it come naturally to you to be as open as you are in your work?
I want to answer. I'm going to take this opportunity because I don't want to interrupt you, but I have to plug in my device here. So 1 second, and then I'll answer that.
Okay. Are we doing okay, Jack?
Oh, we're doing wow! It's fantastic. It's really I love it how you're ping ponging, asking each other the questions. So,
Yeah,
like
it's great.
I was telling May before you came on that yeah, so if I interviewed you, obviously it'd be great because I'll be I'm a good interviewer, but but it's such another level having May, because you're on the same wavelength, you're
Absolutely.
yeah,
We are.
it's just there should be more interviews like this because I'm sure you've done so many interviews before and that you get the same questions again and again and it'd be, so you don't but now you're really like
We're having a
from an
conversation.
from an equal, you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
spectacular. It's gold. It's podcast gold.
It's a podcast gold. Well, yeah, I'm really glad. Thank you for making this happen.
No, my pleasure. I know.
Where are you right now?
I'm in the south of Italy.
Ah,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, you wouldn't like it.
I'm listening.
May, where are you?
I'm in northern Michigan in Traverse City.
Okay. Is
I
that where
don't
you
know. Yeah, I'm at home.
Yeah, I've been to Sault Ste. Marie, and I'm from Minnesota originally.
Oh,
Um
yeah.
yeah, I'm from northern Minnesota, so I know the territory you're in, honey. I live in Portland, Oregon, and that's where I'm in the attic, my attic office in Portland, Oregon. What you can't see right now is Zazu is curled up into a sweet little ball on the desk right in front of me. So she's like between me and my computer, just out of the frame, snuggled up. And now one of my cats disappeared. Come on, kitty.
You ever
But
get to play over there? Are you on tour, May? Do you ever get to Portland? Or
I am going to be there with, I think my friend Theo Katzman, Cheryl, or at least his music.
yeah.
I'm opening for him on a tour coming up this spring.
Oh, cool.
I'm so sorry that plug isn't working. I'm almost there. But yeah, well, you're going to be in Portland. I can tell you the date in a second. And I know we would love to have you as a guest if you were around and available.
Oh my gosh, I would love that. I would love that.
Okay, there we go. Great. Sorry about that.
was Tio quite jealous of you getting this interview then, May?
I wanted to connect with him about it and ask him like, what should I ask her? But I haven't had time. So he's gonna be so excited. And I know you two have corresponded a little on Twitter I think a couple times. And I remember wrote to me when that happened, was like, look, May, look, because he's such a huge fan of yours. So
Oh, that's so sweet.
yeah, we both really love your work. And
Well, I totally want to come to your show.
let me tell you the date before I forget to do that.
Okay.
It's in I think March. No, April, perhaps.
Get on stage and do backing vocals.
It's April 5th. Then we're
April
playing in
5th.
Portland.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be in Portland. So
will.
I am there. I'm going to put it on my calendar. I really want to
Okay.
come. Do you know
Then
where
it's
are you going to be at Revolution Hall or Aladdin or where are you going to be?
I can tell you. Let me look. It is the Wonder Ballroom.
The Wonder Ballroom. Awesome. That's just not far from my house at all.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
I love Portland. I haven't been back there in a long time. And so
Yeah, I live in Northeast Portland. I love it.
sorry for that
Where
interruption.
were we? You were answering a question I asked.
I think it was about no, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think the question was like about Like where, does that vulnerability or courage come naturally to you? And like, and where do you, you know, where does it, when and how do you decide what to be vulnerable about, versus what you're like, yeah, maybe that's not ready right now to really go into the world?
I I resonated with so much of what you said. I think one thing you said that reminded me is like you don't share everything, like you don't cut a vein and write. And I think there's something about the confessional song that can take from people, or confessional writing that can kind of ask a lot of people. It's almost like, whoa, like, but then there's a certain kind of vulnerability that comes from a different place. And I don't know always what the difference is, but there is a difference. And I think sort of that confessional, just sharing everything without a groundedness isn't always useful in the world. And so like, I think what you're describing of like these places that feel good to be vulnerable from versus things that are just more like privacy. Like you don't want to just like kind of share or be thoughtless about who you might impact or how they might be impacted. And so I kind of have seen that in music where some music that's vulnerable takes and some music that's vulnerable gives. And I don't even always know that I could say why. But that's something I try to pay attention to. And I do keep a lot of things private in my life. But what I don't think is that human experience is private. Like that's, I guess, where it sort of becomes interesting to me. Like I always say to friends, because people will be like, oh, maybe I shared too much, or maybe I shouldn't have said that when I talked about something hard. And I'm sort of like, well, when have you ever shared something hard and someone said, wow, I've never felt that way? Like it's always the opposite. It's always someone going, oh, well, I feel that way too. Like our humanness isn't a mystery really. Like we all are living. So like those shared moments of vulnerability are often like something everyone can relate to. And so I try to remember that when I'm sitting down to write. And maybe that is the difference between something being deeply personal to something being deeply vulnerable. Like maybe those are
Yeah,
two different
absolutely.
spaces.
Yeah, for me, what I think that the difference is between those things is, have you as an artist, so now my cat Hugo is also trying to lie on top of the dog. So they're fighting over this real estate right in front of me. Um, to me, the job of an artist is to tell the universal human story by telling the story of particular humans, right? And I'm using that when I say telling the story, in loose terms, like obviously in writing, you are telling the story and in music you are, but like in painting, I mean, I think there are all these ways to tell that human story, but to use the particular and the specific, sometimes it is actually autobiographical. Other times it's a fictional character we create, but to find that universal thread. So when I'm, for example, deciding it's time to write about having been sexually abused as a child or cheating on my husband or, fill in the blank, some things that would normally be kept in the private realm. When I make that decision to tell the truth about that, it's not because I feel like, you know what, I need to tell this story. Um, it's because I have found as an artist the thread that connects my experience to the human experience. And so I'm
Mhm.
writing it in such a way that I know that in telling my story, I'm telling the story of so many others. And so for me, like when I teach writing, I often say, having lived through it is not enough. Especially this is a really misunderstood thing when it comes to memoir writing. A lot of people will say, well, I mean, I've actually had people say straight to my face, you have to be a narcissist to write a memoir. And that is such a profound misunderstanding of the form because, of course, memoirists are doing really only what novelists and fiction writers have done through all time, which is that, you take a character and tell their specific and particular story and try to find, make that universal connection to the human experience. In memoir, that character just happens to be the self, but you still have to do all that work of like creating that self on the page and making them a real person. And the litmus test isn't, um, I just want to spit out all the terrible things that have happened to me so that you'll have sympathy for me. It's actually, can I take all of this beautiful and terrible stuff that's happened to me and make a story that other people feel seen inside of. You know, when people talk to me about so many of those personal stories I've written in Wild and Tiny Beautiful Things and even my novel Torch, what they talk to me about is themselves. You know, they talk to me about how they too experience this feeling or this situation or this revelation. And I think that that's absolutely what happens in music. I mean, nobody ever listened, nobody ever cried to a brokenhearted love song because they were sad for the singer or the songwriter. You know, they're sad for themselves. And
Yeah.
like that's the magic we create when we use our broken hearts to tell those stories. So to that, that's to me the question, like, can you make it universal? Can you make that particular experience universal? And until you can, it's just your story. It's not art yet.
Yeah, I love that. There's so many beautiful treasures in there that I think so many creatives could benefit from hearing and relate to. So when you're writing something like that, are you directly thinking about how it will be digested?
No,
No.
no. I write from just a deep place within, but I do think, I mean, like a really good, I think the best way for me to explain this point is to really give the example of Wild, which for people listening, in case you don't know, Wild is this memoir I wrote about my 1,100-mile hike on the Pacific Crest Trail in the summer of 1995. And it's about me processing the grief I was going through. My mother had died very suddenly at 45 a few years before that, and I was devastated and had done a lot of self-destructive stuff, and I was trying to figure out how to be how to be a human in the world without my mom. And for years, so I hiked the trail in 95. The book was published in 2012. And a lot of people will say, "Why did you wait so long to write the story of that hike?" And I always say, I wrote it exactly when it was time to write it, and that was when I had something to say. And what I mean by that is, of course, if you and I had met, in 95 or 96, just after I got off the trail, I would have told you the story of my hike and you would have said, "Wow, that's so interesting." And it was interesting. But until that experience of my hike, the story I had to tell about that experience of the hike, until it transcended my own life, until it became something that was just an interesting story I had about my own life, I couldn't have written about it. And so I had to, as a writer, go on that sort of deep internal journey of like trying to figure out like what is the meaning of this experience? How does this material become not just an interesting story about me, but a deep story about the human experience? And so I just a lot of times the way I find that connective thread is I write. I write and I write and I write and I find my way through the dark forest, the metaphorical dark forest, to see like if there's more there than just like, oh, look at me. I went on a long walk and my mom died and that was really sad.
Yeah.
And it was when I was writing, I wrote the scene of, the first day of my hike, I'm in this motel in Mojave, California, and I have all this backpacking stuff on the bed and I pack my pack for the very first time. And what happens is I cannot lift my pack. It is so heavy. I have so much stuff that I cannot lift my pack. And it was honestly in writing that scene that I learned that there was a book in this journey. Because what happened in real life and in the book is, I had a pack I couldn't lift and I had no choice but to lift it. I had to bear what I could not bear. And when I understood that that was the meaning of that scene, and in fact, that was the meaning of that entire hike, I realized, oh, yeah, that is the human story. Because when you're saying, listen, I couldn't bear this and I had to, you are talking to all of us and you are talking about all of us. So, of course, I told my own personal journey of how I learned how to bear what I could not bear, both in the form of a backpack and a dead mother. But when people read it and when it resonated with them, what they felt in their hearts is their own unbearable journeys, their own burdens that they had to carry. And that is freaking magic, like I love the magic of that. I love that I can hear your songs, May, and feel in my body their meaning.
Mm.
That is, I mean, I think it's one of the most sacred things in all of human existence.
Mm. Do you think that because you are so like in the journey still, that you needed to be able to have perspective on the journey you went through to really identify the purpose it had in your life? Like, do you think you needed to have the time removed from it to have the sort of like, oh, that was my hero's journey? Like, that was like,
Yeah.
because I think when you're in those kind of things, and this might be part of what we're talking about of like the difference between like what we're getting out of it. If you're in it, like, how could you have the perspective to know what it means in your life yet? Like, thinking about your story and just that, like the intensity there of grief and all the big transitions and everything you were trying to accept and do, you were doing the work. So having the like kind of visual or like vision to know what that meant to you yet seems like pretty that would be almost impossible to do, I guess. To know
Yeah.
what like meant to you while you were just finished it, or like even so it makes sense that to me anyways that you needed time to examine what it was in order to be able to put it in context that was absorbable for anyone in a way that was relatable perhaps. And I don't know, like you said you were looking through your journals. I'm sure, I don't know if you wrote during that time, but I
Yes.
imagine you did. And I wonder the difference between what the book is versus the journals.
Huge. Yeah. Well, so first, I was writing wild as a 40-year-old woman. So I had absolutely perspective that I couldn't have had until I had some time. But yeah, I did keep a journal, of course, but I also, there's a huge difference between my journals and the book, because the journal is that raw experience, and I used it a lot for to as like, oh, okay, that's where I was on that day, and that's the day that I met this person. Or sometimes there would be details about the landscape or the people I met or the conversations we had that were super helpful when I wrote the book. But it's certainly not, Wild isn't like a day by day report of I mean, it reads like it is, but it's not, it's so much more crafted. Of course, my journal is just like me
Yeah.
complaining about how much my feet hurt all the time, which in
Yeah.
Wild, I also complain about it.
Yeah.
But it's a much more polished form to write a memoir than just journals. But what about you? Do you journal? How do you what are the source materials for your work?
I do journal badly. Like my journals become lists, become set lists, become songs, become journals. Like it's like this kind of, I'm very disorganized in those ways, which I accept as just part of the way that I am. But yeah, I think that I I really chase inspiration of something that strikes me deeply. And so I'm always like kind of making room in my life for that inspirational moment of like, oh, that should be, let me harvest whatever inspiration I can from that moment. And then later I'll fine tune it or examine it and figure out what it's going to mean, or if it's going to be a song, or how to use it in a creative way. So yeah, I kind of always just harvesting things as a songwriter. And I'm sure you're similar with writing. It's like, what's moving me, or what's moving the people around me? Like what is actually important in these conversations, or important to talk about? And one of the things that I was thinking about, just in knowing a little bit about your history and some of the more difficult things that you've been through, and we were talking, Jack and I were talking about like how art can be used in an activist way, in a progressive way, where you're kind of speaking out about things. And he was saying there's some podcasts that are more directed towards activism or political, just like that kind of songwriting or that kind of art. And he was like, and that's not really what we're talking about today necessarily. And then I was like, but I think maybe that it is, because what you're doing emotionally is creating room for feelings that there's not a lot of room for in our society. And I just wonder if you had kind of used your own experience, pain, and transformative things to kind of fuel a higher purpose of sorts, without sounding cheesy, but like I consider your work activism, like emotional space through grief or dealing with transitions or all these things that are really difficult in life. Um, that we all go through, like no matter whether we're progressive or whatever we're doing with our lives, we are dealing with these things in our hearts that need attention. And your work to me creates a lot of space for that journey. And I'm wondering if there's any sort of intentional space that you've kind of created in your creative self for that specifically, where you like take it as a higher purpose or sort of being an emotional activist. If you
Absolutely.
resonate.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked that question because it is something I've really thought about a lot. I have always been very politically active. And in fact, my first jobs out of college were as, an act like a paid political activist. I worked um, for this organization called Women Against Military Madness in Minneapolis. And they're an anti-militarization, anti-racism, treaty rights organization in Minnesota. They still exist. And I I also was an environmental activist and have been a feminist activist all of my life. I have, uh, I think, like several months ago, I put up on Instagram this picture of me at like age 20, in front of a Planned Parenthood in St. Paul, Minnesota, um, escorting women who were coming in for services. When I was in my 20s, I was conflicted because I knew that I had this call to be a writer. And yet I also knew I felt passionately about, being a very involved and active citizen when it comes to political activism. And they seemed to me at odds with each other, right? It was like, how do I do both? And so, um, over time, I mean, I continued to do, I do both, and I have done both. But over time, and I would say most specifically over this last decade, since Wild and Tiny Beautiful Things have been out, and I should say, you know, I'd be happy to send you a copy, maybe. But there's a new edition of Tiny Beautiful Things out, the new 10th anniversary edition. I'll send you a copy. It has some new columns in it. But in this decade, since these 2 books have been out, there truly, and I'm not being hyperbolic, has not been a day that I did not receive numerous emails and sometimes meet people in person who say, "This book changed my life." And I really have begun to think about that, that I'm such a believer, this is advice I always give as sugar, that we have to follow that path that reveals itself within us, that deep core voice that we all have inside of us that says, this is what you really love or really long to do. And I think that if you do that, what inevitably ends up happening is you give to the world what we need. And I do think that you're absolutely right, that there is political impact. When people feel changed by something I wrote, I think that brings good into the world
Mhm.
because that means that that person is more capable of loving, more capable of being open to ideas, more capable of contributing, more capable of being generous and concerned about others, to have insights about the self. All of those things that we think of as these kind of like woo woo, soft, emotional, psychological, self helpy, all that kind of stuff. All of those are sort of degraded. They're definitely identified with the female and they're seen as lesser. But what I think is my impact on the world, that there are other people who are beautifully out there protesting or campaigning or holding public office and making change, legislating, all of those people, lawyers who are fighting for good causes, they're all doing that good work that we need to have done. And yet I also think, May, that you and I are doing good work too, and Jack too with this podcast, that any time that we expand our ability um, to think more generously and lovingly about ourselves or others, we expand good in the world. And that is inherently political in my mind. I think so. All of my work is deeply feminist. That quote I just said from Wild, where is, story, fear is a story. Um, the that we've been told through all time. The we I'm talking about is women and girls. Men too, though. I mean, just the radical act of saying, you know what? I've always been told I'm not allowed to do this alone. And guess what? I'm going to do it. Like, that is a political act, to be a woman and to say, I am going to walk alone, even though I live in a world that has made me um, a victim. Even though I'm in a world that uh, I am part of a gender that is preyed upon. I'm going to say, I'm going to do this anyway. That is a political act. And so to tell stories about it is as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's so, I haven't heard very many people talk about that. And it's really, I think it's so important. And I have experienced your work as feminist work. And I've actually just, I made the record I was telling you about through a transition of divorce. And of course, because of that, a lot of women gravitated to it in the same situation, right? And so I would get feedback from women that were going through that, some directly in my community reaching out saying, I'm going through something similar. How did you do it? Like, what did you do? And a lot of those women who reached out to me in that position, I sent your book and was like, I can't tell you what to do except for get a therapist and read this book. And like, a lot of them were like, thank you for giving me that book. And it wasn't that the book had any answer for them. It was just like, here's a comrade that's going to help you be brave. Like, in whatever way that you like, whatever you find in there, it's up to you. And there's so many different things people can take from that. So it's not even advice, or it's not like a book about self-help or anything. It's just like,
Right.
here's human experience that you will relate to that might give you a little bit of courage. And I think your writing, I'm sure, has done that for so many people. And I wonder, and this is sort of a selfish question because I do this work in a different way, but similarly, when people become emotionally attached to your work in a life-changing way, do you ever feel a sense of responsibility or concern in those situations where people are sort of projecting what you have done for them in a like kind of hero-like way, or putting you in a position like some of these letters, even like you took some risks by even responding to, because some of these situations are so emotionally intense. Like, do you ever let the responsibility of that, does that ever feel tricky to navigate? And also, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's been a very big experience of the last decade, navigating just that exactly. Because people do feel deeply connected to me. Um, a, a lot of times, I mean, it's funny because it's like people will be like, "You're my best friend and you don't know it,"
Yeah.
because they feel that kind of. And I know how that feels. I do. I know how that feels as a reader too, where you read a book and you're just like, "Oh my goodness, like we are so kindred." I feel that way about musicians too. Like how many times have I thought like, um, Joni Mitchell or Lucinda Williams, or, like they don't know it, but they're my friend. You know what I mean? Like, because,
Yeah.
right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? Like you feel
Absolutely.
so connected to them. And what I've, what, you use that word, do I feel responsible? Or, sometimes people say burden. Um, I've had to learn not to. And
Mhm.
here's my thinking on that is what I realize is that I've given everything I can give, that I poured all of my heart into that writing that made them feel less alone, that made them feel connected to me, or at least the experience I was writing about. And, that I can't be like a best friend, a real best friend to everyone who feels that sense of connection and kinship to me. But what I can do is keep giving that thing that made them feel that way. And that is my work. That is my life's uh, purpose and mission. And of course, every once in a while, I mean, I've met fans who walked up to me and said, "You're my best friend and you don't know it." And, life turned in such a direction that we actually did become friends, So
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm not open to having, like meeting through work, like you and I, might become friends, right? In real life. Or it might be that what brought us together was this beautiful connection of our art, and that's enough, you know?
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
we don't know yet because we just met over Zoom. But,
Yeah.
like, I try to stay open to both trajectories while knowing that in most cases, when people read my work and say, I want to meet you because I love your work, it's just going to have to be like, you know, the way that we're connected is only through the work. And I'm not going to take that on. Look, I'm not going to feel bad about that. I think that that's, as Sugar would say, boundaries are real.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for
And
that.
I think too, it's like my friend Pam Houston has talked about this a bit too. Like the people I have become friends with, if we first met because they were a fan or something, that like there's the only way that a friendship will inevitably work is that like that first like admiration kind of thing has to fall away, because the thing is you're always going to disappoint. You know what I mean? Like the Cheryl, the writer on the page is, this crafted thing that is, that I've written that makes you feel a specific way. Well, me in real person, in real life, I'm a full on human, right? And so you do have to shift that way of relating. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. Like when you move from like, we met through a mutual admiration and then we got deeper and moved into the real human stuff that is something very different than
Mhm.
making art, sharing it with each other.
Do you think, I'm sorry if I'm asking too many questions. Do you think that, like when you talk about boundaries, like, and I relate to your writing is so much you shared about being intuitive. So you're emotionally aware of what's happening around you. You're able to express that in this really deep way that connect you. Do you think that, how do you have good boundaries and remain permeable to that in a creative sense? Like, I know, like, I'm not asking for personal life advice, but I mean, like, in a creative world, there's a certain amount of being permeable and allowing this exchange. But then, like you're talking about, you have to have some good boundaries around what you are to these people. And I'm curious, like, I don't know if it's protect, but how you nurture your creative space that way and allow it to sort of remain curious and permeable and not rigid. If you have like kind of practices that you use to keep that sort of channel in a good space, or um,
It's really, it, I mean, we could talk about this for hours because I need some advice from you because it really is complicated because you know what and what I'm thinking specifically is um you know to protect my creative part of protecting one's creative life is simply protecting one's time, which is an incredibly, I think everyone has challenges with that, like making enough time to do your work. But I think in particular, if you have kids, I'm the mother of two teenagers. I have a son and a daughter, and there's just a lot of demands in the family realm,
yeah,
and then I have this even more limited period of time to create. And one of the things that I've had to struggle the most with when it comes to boundaries is not so much that fan thing we were talking about where people were like, I love you. You changed my life. I want to meet you for coffee because I want to talk more about what you wrote. Like, that to me has been pretty simple to be like, I've given you everything I can give. I can't meet everyone for coffee. Where it gets more complicated for me is other writers who are like, will you blurb my book? Or will you interview me on stage? Or will you, because my natural desire is to do that. Like I have always been, I mean, part of my activism is art activism. I've always been a champion of other artists, specifically other writers. I will do almost anything to help other people um get their books out or get share their work. I love to do that. Like that's a sincere part of me. But I've also over this last decade had to slowly but surely realize that I have to have boundaries about some of that because otherwise that's going to take up all of my writing time. That there will be
yeah,
nothing left for me to create because I'm helping other creators. And
yeah,
that's tricky, because I've had to learn how to be um how to say this word that's very much against my true nature. It's a two-letter word, no, and I'm pretty bad at saying it. Um, but I've gotten better.
yeah,
And that's been, like, really hard for me to do, but that's, so to stay permeable. Like when I first was figuring out how to say no, it felt the opposite of permeable. It felt like that's putting up a wall, and I'm like that's a kind of non-permeable permeable state, right? But
Mhm.
again, my thinking had to shift. Kind of like I just said, actually being safe is putting yourself at risk. I had to say, actually, never saying no is what you're doing is you're walling yourself off to your own work. That the permeability that's the most important thing is that between me and that inner drive to create between me and that voice on the page. And I will have no voice on the page if I never get to the page.
Yeah.
So for learning how to protect that has been um, hard, and I'm still on the road. And if you
Yeah.
how to do it, sister, uh, advice is welcome.
No, I don't have any advice, but I hear you, and I think what you're talking about protecting is so beautiful and really important. I don't know how much time we are supposed to have, and I want to be cognizant of that. Do you have a certain time limit, Cheryl? Because I could talk to you forever, but
You're asking the woman who just said she can't say no. um, I could look at
how
people.
are you today?
I'm I Jack, I'm happy to talk another 10 minutes or so, but if you
Yeah,
want
it's
us
a
to or
flexible
not.
podcast thing.
Okay.
It's not a radio show, so yeah, we can go forever. And but that's it. If
Forever.
I could just
Well,
ask about time,
Well,
what
I
about
kind of
family? How do you say no to family? If I could just
yeah.
jump in with that, because that's what I'm struggling with at the moment.
oh, so what is it? Do you have one child or two? What's your family
I've
situation?
got a 5-month-old.
Oh,
Forget about it.
Forget
yeah.
about it.
You just say yes, baby.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very
Sorry,
much for the
Jack.
advice.
The news is bad.
Okay.
Well, that's right. It's actually it's hard to say no. You can't say no to a baby, and so what you need to learn, like what I needed to learn how to do, is first of all just I have a wonderful partner. My partner Brian Lindstrom is a documentary filmmaker, and so we both all of our parenting lives, all of our adult lives have been artists trying to make it. And, when our kids were little, we were poor as paupers, like really, really struggled. And we had to, just really be each other's partners and help each other and just say, you know, "I'll take the baby," or in our case, the babies, our kids are 17 months apart. So we had 2 babies really, um, "and you go work,"
Mm.
and sometimes that work was for an hour, and sometimes that work was for a few days. I mean, obviously, I couldn't leave the babies when they were quite that young, but, we really had each other's backs, and we as much as possible. I mean, we still sometimes argued over, like, "You had time to go on a run, and I didn't," this kind of thing. But most of the time, we really believed in each other, and what we did is we really stepped in to help each other. So, when I would be at a critical point, my first book, Torch, I sold it when I was pregnant with my first child, and by the time it was published, I had 2 kids under the age of 2. And I had to do the edits, and I had to do all this revision and everything with babies. And Brian really stepped up, and he was like, "Go in the basement." My office was in the basement, "and do your work, and I'm with you. I've got you. I'm and then times when, he'd be in the crunch time with the film, I would say, "I believe in you. Go do this. It's so important." And then there were times when we both needed help. And unfortunately, we didn't have family or free childcare, but we paid for it. And so it was really that sense of like, we're in this together. A baby and children, toddlers, they're highly demanding, and they deserve all of our attention. And so what we did is we made sure they got that, while we also got to have to do our work and make good on the dreams that we had, and the projects that we had in the works. And that changes as they get older. I mean, that's the other piece of advice, Jack, I'd give you is like, y- you know, if I could go back in time, and have those babies be babies again, I would have told myself, just don't worry about it so much. Babies, they're so
Yeah.
fleeting,
Mhm.
and just
That's
be,
beautiful.
be with that baby as much as possible and keep your hand in the work that's important to you. And know that, like, soon you'll be able to send them off to school or off to other places where you'll have more time. And then when they're teenagers, you know, they're not going to want to, you know,
Yeah.
go. So and my kids are like, they're demanding in another way. Don't get me wrong. But they when I say I'm in my office working and leave me alone, they're very glad to. So
Please play with me.
so that'll come. But it's the struggle is real,
Mm.
and it's all about, I think, honoring all of the things that are important to you, and not forgetting that being a father and being an artist are two things that are of big importance, and you need to make room for them in your life.
Thank you.
Mhm. That's beautiful. I remember when I had a baby, I was like, what did I used to do with the whole 24 hours that was just free? Like, I was like, what the hell did I do with all that time? So one thing I remember welcoming was like, oh, I'm like being forced to time manage, like better than I ever have in my whole life. Like, have
Mhm.
to in order to like even get a little tiny half a song done. Like, so it was like really hard, but also like kind of forced me to get more organized, which as an artist, I always like figure as some sort of blessing because it's hard to stay organized with my life. So my child has definitely helped me to organize my priorities for sure. And that's
Absolutely. I felt the same
yeah.
way. I think everyone who becomes a parent feels that, where you're just like,
Mhm.
wait a minute, what was all of that time I wasted? Yeah, now it's become so much more efficient,
I am very much more
So
efficient. Yeah.
how old is your child, May?
She's 8.
Okay, so we've got the whole spectrum here. We've got a baby, we've got an 8-year-old. I have a 17 and 18-year-old.
Mhm.
And well, I hate to tell you folks, but the kids are trouble all the way along. There's just different kinds of demands, different kinds of attention that you need to give. And what's beautiful and painful, there's a column even about in Tiny Beautiful Things about the decision to have a kid. The column, The Ghost Ship That Didn't Carry Us. A man, a 41-year-old man, wrote to me and said, should I become a father or not? And I wrote him back and told the story of my own kind of ambivalence as an artist, especially like I want to be able to spend all my time writing what's going to happen when I have a baby. And my husband and I decided, of course, to become parents. And I write in that column what I still believe to be true, that there are things that I have not been able to do and achieve as a writer because of the demands of mothering, that I just simply my attention had to be elsewhere. And yet I also believe in equal measure, beautifully and truly, that there are things that I absolutely couldn't have and wouldn't have written had I not been, their mother. And so I think that any path we choose, anything that demands as much as parenting demands, which is everything, is going to deplete us in ways, but that depletion will also be incredibly enriching, and it will contribute rather than detract in the end to your work and your life.
You know that song Brandy Carlisle has called The Mother? I don't know if you guys listen to her, but one of the
God,
lines about her daughter and the chorus is, I am the mother of a baby. And she talks about all of the different realms of being a parent. But one of the things she says is, I'll never hit the big time without you. And it's sort of like I don't know, my child has inspired me as much as she's taken my time. And as much as like you talked about never regretting me doing the brave thing. But I've also heard like, I've never regretted the time I spent with my child. Like,
yeah,
and I've considered that to be true for the 8 years I've done it. It's like, I've never regretted that investment of time where I have in other places. So I don't know if that's a useful little tidbit, but I hold that still. I think about that anytime I have to sacrifice something career wise for my daughter. It's like, oh, she is the path of my life.
yeah. And
And
I want to say, May, I completely 100% agree with you, but I want to say too that just to reassure people listening out there who might be parents and might be, there are time I've never regretted time I spent with my kids either. And yet it's also true that I do remember times that I felt exhausted and my patience was worn thin and I fretted and worried. I remember this one time that I was actually at a park with my kids and they were toddlers. And I was just sitting there watching them play and pushing them on swings and catching them on the slide. And I remember this ache in my gut because I felt this sense of panic that I had this, that I think I was probably meant to be working on wild, um, and I wasn't because I didn't have childcare and my kids needed me. And I needed to be with them at the park instead of writing this book that I was contracted to write. And I had this really terrible, like, pain in my gut. Like, not that, I mean, of course, I didn't regret having my kids. I love my kids beyond, words. But I did feel a sense of like panic and sorrow and like, I'm going to be behind everyone else who doesn't have kids. And, a lot of those negative emotions were real. And now I look back on that and I think like, okay, just like everything, part of being a parent is that sometimes you're gonna like sometimes it doesn't feel great. Like sometimes it's hard and sometimes we struggle and we grapple with finding that sense of balance between um, you know, our own work and being their parents.
Yeah. I'm really glad you said that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Well, I
And
know people need to hear that because I think sometimes people can feel really alone, because the truest story is just exactly what you said, May, is like my kids are the path and I love them, all of that. But, I think it's really important we talk about the dark side of those beautiful things because there is a dark side.
yeah, there's a lot of shame towards working parents too, especially as a woman. There's a lot of like, you shouldn't be working if you're a mom. Like, there's a lot of mom shaming, but I'm sure it goes the other way. I'm just not a dad, so I don't know. But being a performer and a mother of a young child, I received so much judgment if I wasn't with my daughter. And I noticed something really interesting when my partner at the time was away from us. People would ask, how is Iris? How is May? And when I was away from them, they would say, "Where is Iris?" And I was like, "Oh, the expectation is that I should always be with my child, and that if I'm not, what something is wrong." Whereas the father could go and work, and it's like, "How are they doing? It's normal for you to be out." And I'm sure now, like, I don't mean it to necessarily be a sexist thing, but it was just interesting. Like, I think of being a hardworking parent and juggling that, there's always some judgment that will come at you for taking the time you need to do your job, and people just don't really know. People have no idea what's going on or your dynamics. So it can be really hard to juggle all of it for sure.
Oh yeah, I got lots of that same stuff, May. A lot of sexist kind of assumptions or concerns. I've traveled a lot. Um, I travel a lot for work, and my husband does too, but people are far more alarmed. Also, for me, like what was interesting to me is my husband often traveled when our kids were really young, and nobody was like saying, "Well, we should organize and bring, like drop dinner off for Cheryl since she's alone with the kids." But then when when Wild came out and I went on my book tour, people are like, "Why don't we organize dinners that will drop off for Brian?" And I was just like, "Okay, yeah, that was interesting."
Yeah. Oh man. I want to, if we can quickly shift back to the song really quick, and then I know we probably have to go, Cheryl.
Yeah, that's what
But
let's back.
I want to just, since the idea is writing a song from this conversation, I'm curious if there's any piece of your writing because I know it sounds like you're a music lover and I'm sure music has been a part of your life and writing in some way, whether it's conscious or subconscious. I'm curious if there's any piece of your writing that you've ever been like, so would you write a song about this, or this would make a great song, or anything that you would steer us to focus on as a piece of your writing that we could pull a song out of.
Oh
Steal.
my gosh, that's such a great question. I mean, I feel like so so many of the columns in Tiny Beautiful Things are, potential like material for songs. Like I said, I want to send you the new, the one let me just tell you the one that came to mind.
Yeah.
Of course, like I also don't want to steer you in any direction. Like I want you to, so is the idea that you're going to like write a song based on our conversation, not based on my writing?
Anything goes, right, Jack?
A little bit of
Yeah, of
both.
course, anything goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I feel like when you asked that question, one of the columns that came to mind, I can actually just send you the link to it too, because it's online. But because I write this monthly Substack Dear Sugar newsletter. I do one Dear Sugar letter a month. I will add you both to the mailing list if you want to get it. But
Thank you. Yeah.
of course, but there's this one called We Are the Solid, and it's in the new edition of the book. And it's a column I wrote about a year and a half ago, after my father died, my father from whom I was estranged and had been estranged, since I was a child. Had only seen him once, the last time I saw him I was 14. Okay. And uh I received a letter from a woman who was estranged from her mother. And she says, should I send my mother a birthday card? That it was like a milestone birthday. And even though they were estranged, she had this feeling that she wanted to just acknowledge her mother's birthday. And the question was, should she do it or not? Or, if she sends the letter, the card, will this undo all of that work that she's done on herself, the healthy setting of the boundary of saying, you're no longer in my life because you're abusive. And so I got this letter right after I found out my father died. He, like I said, we hadn't been in touch for decades, and he died of a heart attack in his home. And my brother and sister and I all, got a call saying our dad was dead. And it was this weird feeling of like, how do you grieve somebody you stopped loving a long time ago, who you let go, who was dead to you? And in my letter back to this woman, who wrote to me about whether she should send a birthday card to her estranged mom, I wrote about, I think in some ways, like something that we've been circling around a little bit in our conversation in a really abstract kind of way. But I wrote about this idea of, that it didn't matter, whether she actually sent the card or not. That really what, that strength that she had that allowed her to set that boundary wasn't, couldn't be dismantled by a single action. That she herself, through all of the growing she'd done over the years, had made herself a solid. That like this wasn't, she wasn't in a permeable state with her mother. She was in a state of she's become the strong and brave and courageous person that essentially this really ugly situation forced her to become, just as I had become that out of an ugly situation with my father. And that doesn't mean that we aren't impacted or we aren't sad when sad things happen, or that we sometimes don't feel confused about that relationship, but that there is a point in our lives that we reach that we can stand tall in the solidity of who we are. And the things that made us are the beautiful things and the ugly things. And, that column came to mind because I think that it's there again, born out of two specific stories, the letter writer and me. And yet it resonates with so many people because so many people have had to go on that journey of figuring out. I love that you use that word, permeable, where to be permeable and where to stand solid in what they know to be true, to be the truest thing. I don't know. It seems like it could be good fodder for a song. I think we've talked about. Thank you. I think we've talked about so many things, though, that could be.
It's just, it's a bit
I mean,
overwhelming, actually.
I think that little layer for a lot of what we talked about, it makes sense. Like we could channel a lot of our conversation into the sentiments of that article, perhaps. So I'm glad that you answered. I just, before we say goodbye, I hope to see you at the show, and please let me know if you'd like to come.
I want to come. I'm letting you know right now.
Okay, great.
I'll come. I really want to come. Yeah.
Okay. We'll make sure that you're on the list, and we'll give you a +1 if you want to bring somebody.
So my husband would love to come too.
Okay. But I just
May, do you know the singer songwriter Judy Sill?
I've heard the name, but I don't know the music super well. Judy Sill.
Judy Sill. It's Judeesill.
Okay.
Sill. She died in 1979. She was the first artist that David Geffen signed to Asylum Records. So she was in a cohort with Jackson Browne and Joni Mitchell and Linda Ronstadt and J.D. Souther and Graham Nash. She was friends with all of them. But the reason I'm asking is my husband has spent the last 6 years making a documentary film about Judy Sill. And
Really?
yeah, and it just premiered last month in New York. It's not it's now they're trying to find like, a distributor, and it's not streaming yet or anything, but it premiered at the NYC Doc Festival last month. But it's a beautiful film about her beautiful and ultimately tragic life. And it does this thing we were talking about because it's very specifically a story about her, which, a lot of musicians have been deeply influenced by her and they cover her songs and stuff. But I think you'd like her. You should check her out. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it's what I was gonna say is it does this thing where it tells specifically the story about her, but it ends up being a universal story about art making and like what, where it comes from and what happens to it when we bring it into the world, which is sometimes it's not greeted with commercial success, but that doesn't mean it has no bearing on the work itself.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. I look forward to checking her out.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, you guys, it's been so fun to talk to both of
Thank
you.
you.
May
Cheryl,
I
thank you for your work in the world. I just as one other person, you've given me so much room to be brave. So you've impacted my heart in a huge way, and a lot of my music has been born out of that space you made. So thank you.
Well, thank you, May. The moment I heard your music, I knew that we were kindred spirits. I do really love that. I feel in my heart the beauty of that connection between my words and your songs. And I'm just touched beyond words. I do think it's one of the most sacred exchanges we can have. And, onward to knowing you in real life. I can't
Yeah.
come to Portland.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, Jack, so much for bringing us together.
Oh, I'm
Jack,
honored.
thank you.
Oh, what a lucky guy. I mean, to be the catalyst, that's really, I couldn't have hoped for a better conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. It was really wonderful, May.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Okay, happy trails, kids.
Okay. Be well.
All
Go
right,
snuggle with that baby, Jack.
I will do. I'll stay on with you for a moment, May, just to
Okay.
debrief, decompress.
Sounds good.
Oh, wow. That was full on, though. Inspiration.
Yeah, there's so much in there. I'm so glad it's recorded because I was just like,
Yeah. I mean, I've been making notes, but I
good.
filled up a couple of pages. Don't think I covered everything either.
Wow. I hope that was okay. We just went in there.
Beautiful. I mean, it's really you could be so many songs in that. I mean, she set the bar really high. Now we have to write a universal song that touches people. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, feel under a lot of pressure here, really, because yeah, it's amazing what she does with her writing. Doesn't took 20 years to write that book after the event. And
I think so. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
But I think the themes. I mean, we could go with, what she said about being solidified. That's great lyrical territory too. Or bravery, how rewarding it is. That kept coming up and up again and again. And
Yeah. I love that. The title of the article, "We Are the Solid," just that concept of like through our own sort of evolutionary growth, we become solid. And that is something that does not change. And that comes from the courage and bravery and honesty and all those things that we talked about. But in order to get there, you have to do that. Like in order to become that solid, you have to be that brave.
mhm. Yeah, we
And
can't
that,
wait 20 years after this conversation to write a song. So we have to. Maybe it's good that we do that. We focus on one area. Maybe that's the solidify on that area is a good idea to narrow it down, and then it's going to be easier for us.
yeah. Yeah. I don't know how this process usually works as far as like working A lot of times when I co-write, I'll have a Google document with someone, and we'll just kind
Yeah,
of
do
put
that.
ideas in one shared space and work that way.
Let's do it.
Um, and so that might be one place to put ideas. And I want to go read that. I think I actually already have read it, but I want to read it again, the one she said, and just kind of absorb some of today. And we can put thoughts and concepts in the document together and kind of start to see what rises. Does that seem like a good process, maybe?
That sounds like a great idea.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. Well, you did a great job. I mean, you're probably not, you're more used to being interviewed and,
Yeah, I was nervous.
yeah.
I don't interview that many people and not my heroes. It was I had so many questions I didn't ask just because the conversation went different places. But, and I also didn't want her to feel too grilled in
Yes,
a
yeah.
formal way, because I had some more formal style questions that didn't seem as important after a while. So, but yeah, it's an art interviewing that I haven't done a lot. So I hope it's all right. But I got so much out of it just from talking to her. So it was a huge gift to me. Thank you.
No, it sounds like she wanted to interview you. She had lots of questions too. So
Yeah.
that's another episode, I'm sure.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, let's ping back and forth and let's make a hit.
Okay. Sounds perfect, Jack. Thank you again.
Bye, May.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Even concrete breaks down over time, ashes to ashes, an ocean ties, but not you, not I. We are the solid. You're a diamond from all that pressure and pain. They can't crush you, not ever again on your own side. That's a good place to stand. We are the solid. And I can tell you wear it well, but let your heart undress. Try on tenderness. The only way out is simply getting through it. We are the way. We are the solid. You are the rock, dear. You can't run to it now. I'll make it real clear. It's you and no one else. You are the savior. Go ahead and save yourself. We are the solid. And anyone can tell you wear it well. Let your heart undress and try on tenderness. The only way out is simply getting through it. We are the way. We are the solid.
Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the song and the episode. The song will be released next week. Won't be available on all streaming platforms, but you can already pre-save. Please support the artists by following them on social media and adding the song to any playlists you have. This is a completely free show, and you've listened this far, so I'd really appreciate it if you could pay us back by clicking like and subscribe. And follow at Podsongs on social media platforms, or subscribe to the newsletter at podsongs.com for special updates. Or just tell the next person you see about this amazing show where musicians interview their idols and write a song about them. The songs are available for download from the Podsongs website as well, which pays a lot more than the 0.00 whatever we get from Spotify. You can also email me at jack@podsongs.com to give feedback, suggest an artist and guest combos you'd like to hear, or just say hello. We're a listener-supported show, and I'd love to hear from you. A final thanks to my researchers, Dori Verbo and Rosa Marino, my producer, Maurizio Sanicola of Goldmine Records, and musicians Massimino Vozza and Luigi Falcione. The next episode will be out soon. In the meantime, you can listen to more amazing episodes in the archives. Until then, have a great day.